Welcome to Writer's Den. I'm Brenda Joyce Patterson. Writer's Den is a program that uncovers and showcases writers and all things literary in Polk County and beyond. And today we have Nafari Vanaski.
Hi.
Hey, Nafari.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming. Nafari is a journalist. She's been a journalist. She's in public relations now, and she does all kinds of writing, which is why we have her here today.
Yes.
Yes, yes. Journalism, that's an amazing thing. For me, the idea of writing deadlines and multiple deadlines and having to produce every day,
Right.
that scares the bejesus out of me. I'm going to be absolutely honest.
Yeah.
So, as they say, disclosure, full disclosure, Nafari used to be my editor when I used to write for the Ledger. I wrote a library column for the Ledger, and foolish people, they allowed me to do that.
It was a great column. Stand by our decision.
Oh, thank you, thank you. It was the At the Library column.
Yeah.
And so she was my editor. She made me look good. And so tell us a little bit about this whole thing of journalism, deadlines. Why in the world did you decide to do that? You brave individual.
Oh my gosh. Well, the deadline part is hilarious because when I was in journalism school, I decided to get into journalism around high school.
Okay.
After working on a high school newspaper. And that part scared me too, about the deadlines.
Yes.
And I just thought, I don't know how I'm going to get used to it. Well, at my school, at Hampton University, they had a class that was a deadline class. It was
Really?
a 3-hour class, yes. And you had that time, you would come to class, pitch your idea to the teacher. She's like, yes or no, find another idea.
Whoa.
And once you get the approval, you start calling, you start getting everything you need for the story, you write the story, you turn it in by the end of the class. And if you don't, then you fail that day. So that is how I learned to write on deadline.
Oh my Jesus.
And I passed. And the crazy thing was that it was so odd because I remember being truly terrified during that time and just being like, oh my gosh, there's no way I can't do this for my career, I can't do it.
Right.
And I passed the class, I think I got a B. And yes, and after that, deadline writing became a lot less hard though. I mean, it just became a lot easier to handle it. And I've been through a lot of breaking stories in the newsroom.
Yes.
And it's funny that I really think that class did so much to help me deal with stress, because I thought, and this was just college. I mean, I've been through real stories that,
Yes.
But for some reason, that class just conditioned me. And then, when we would have stories breaking on deadline, it just, I was able to just, okay, let's do this. And I've literally worked with people who would get so worked up that they throw their glasses across the room. So, yeah.
Wow.
And so, I don't know. There was something about that class that I just scared it all out of me, so that, when I got into the real world, I was just able to do it. I don't know.
I love that.
Yeah,
Scared it all
crazy.
out of you.
I think that's what happened. But yeah, I really, and I got into it because I had written an article for a high school newspaper. And I don't know. A lot of people will tell you this in journalism, I think, is that they see their first byline and that's like, my name in print.
It's pretty awesome.
It's like a drug. It really is. And it's like, it's crazy because there's so many there are so many different, that I guess what I'm saying is the byline would seem to be a small price for all the stuff that you end up putting up with, especially over 16 years. But it was totally worth it.
16 years.
Yes, and I started on the copy desk, which is really like night shift, weekends. Nobody wants that job, but it's so important. And if I may just say, copy editors are the best. they're so great. They're so great, and stop laying them off. But that's where I started. Yes, that's where I started. And when I moved to Pittsburgh, about 2 years into my journey as a journalist, I had the opportunity to...
You moved from Brooklyn?
No. Oh, yes. This was... Okay, I should map this out a little bit. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. Right. Went to college in Virginia, at Hampton University. And then I moved from Virginia to take a job, my first newspaper job in North Carolina as a copy editor. I stayed there for maybe 2 years.
Wilmington.
Wilmington, yes.
Yes.
And I decided that I was going to quit journalism, but then I really didn't. No. Well, what happened, 9/11 happened there. And I was, being from Brooklyn, it affected me a lot. Of course. And, you know, journalists have a weird way of coping and with disaster, and a lot of it includes humor and things like that. And that was hard for me. And so I decided, I was like, I'm not ready to be that person. Well, I went back in because it's like a drug. And I developed, you know, you don't laugh at tragedy, but you develop everyone has their different way of coping. And I certainly would never joke about a terrorist attack, but you find a way of being like, you're viewing it as an outsider, and you never take it in while you're in the newsroom. I mean, certainly. And
then later. Because, of course, you have deadlines, and you have to get this information out to the public. So I guess at that point, you have to sort of separate just a little bit, enough from your emotions to do the job at hand. Right. And then later, you fall apart, I guess.
Basically.
Yeah. That's like the regular people. At that point, you fall apart.
Yeah, you just delay it for several hours while you have your job hat on.
Right.
But, yeah, so then I went to Pittsburgh after I lived in North Carolina, moved there, worked at the Pittsburgh Tribune Review as a copy editor, and was writing all of this time, just, you know, just doing stories for every paper I've ever worked. I've written for too. And I got an opportunity to be an assigning editor there, so that's kind of what put me on that track. And at the same time, shortly after, I got an opportunity to be a columnist at the same time. Yes. And so I did that for 5 years. At the same time, I was editing 3 newspapers. I think that's correct.
Oh my gosh.
And managing 3 or 4 reporters.
Oh my gosh.
And some freelancers.
Oh my gosh.
Who are not as good as you, I gotta say.
Okay. Let me say that again. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, no, you were great. You really were.
Thank you.
But, you know, unfortunately, not all of them were. Okay. So it was a balancing act. Right. But so I landed here at in Lakeland about 3 years ago now, 4 years, and I spent a little time at the Ledger, and
that's how we met.
That's how we met, and I decided to, just because of the shifting. The shift in the newsroom and not
industry
just
changing.
The industry. I don't want to like make it sound like it was just the newsroom, but the industry was changing. And I have a husband and 2 small children that need to be supported. And I really did not feel like waiting around to be laid off. So I did pursue the job that I'm in now in public relations. But I told myself, if you leave journalism, do not leave writing. Just try to find a way, find a job where you can keep writing and keep, you know, doing journalistic stuff too. And, you know, just try to do that. And so I was fortunate to, you know, find myself in a position where I can, you know, keep writing. But, you know, I do trend still a little bit towards journalistic pieces, you know.
And that is true. Yes. You're right. Part of the reason why I had you here today was obviously to talk about deadlines, because I hate deadlines. But and you
do my best work like 5 minutes before.
And you
it's sad.
You're always so nice to me because I never really hit my deadline.
Can I tell you a secret?
Yes.
I always, you know,
pad it.
I've had it.
Thank God.
Yes. Because and believe me, your copy was always understandable.
Okay, thank God.
So there are people who aren't,
Right.
and so you have to pad in that time so
Right,
that you
right.
can interpret what perhaps they might have been trying to say. So
Okay, all right. Darn.
just being honest.
Well, it's true.
We're talking about both sides.
Yes, yes, you're right. But you say that you try to make sure that your writing still has obviously that element of journalism.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that you said that, because I kind of want to focus on where I'm seeing your writing going.
Yes.
I'm really I don't want to sound patronizing, but I'm really proud of you how you're coming away from journalism, but at the same time, obviously, you're still using your skills.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and you're writing on these really timely topics and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the Washington Post. You were in the Washington Post.
Yeah, that was wild.
That is just amazing. I guess my thing as this local person,
Mm-hmm.
as this person who wants to write, the idea of knowing someone personally
Oh, geez.
who has cracked those markets, it's just kind of amazing. And I wanted you to come on because I want the writers, you writers out there, to know it can happen. You can crack these markets.
Yes.
So you're in the Washington Post. Tell us a little bit about that, because I also want to go to the part that I'm really excited about.
I know which one you like.
But go ahead, tell us a little bit about how you got into the Washington Post.
Okay, well, I am a tennis buff. I have been playing tennis for just about as long as I've been a journalist, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I think I actually got into tennis because of journalism, because it was stressing me out.
Oh, okay. I could understand.
So I have nearly 2 decades of useless tennis knowledge in my head. And nobody to really discuss it with, because I don't know any other truly hardcore tennis fans other than myself who are willing to engage for longer than 2 minutes.
Right.
So there's that. So last fall, the U.S. Open was held, as it is every year in New York, not Brooklyn, but in New York. And
Right.
I, being the tennis nerd, had to watch it. And so the women's final featured
Right.
Serena Williams and Naomi Osaka.
Right.
I got it right. And there was an incident where Serena Williams lost her temper a little bit.
Yes, I saw that.
And I was so frustrated. I mean, as a fan, I got frustrated because I was just like, she's doing it again. Why does she keep doing these things? And I have a rule. The final was on a Saturday. Yes, on Saturday. So my general rule is to stay off social media on Saturdays and Sundays, just
Right.
for my mental health.
Right.
But I was so worked up by the end of this, because I was just like, I had so many feelings, and I broke my rule and I got on the internet to see what people were saying, and everyone was just, you know, defending Serena and going off on this poor umpire who was trying to do his job. And I, as a tennis fan, am sitting there like, do any of you ever watch tennis before, until like before this moment? Do none of you know what you're talking about?
No.
So, and that's fine. It's fine to say that. But so basically, I was on Facebook, and there's a group that features writers and editors on Facebook that I'm in. And one of the posts was from an editor at the Post who was looking for different perspectives on this incident. And I also have a tennis blog that I've been writing for many years.
Tennis with Attitude.
Tennis with Attitude, thank you. And I had already written a post about it because I was so worked up and I had so many feelings. So I was just like, so I responded and I said, I would be happy to tell you what I think. And I basically gave my perspective, which was, you know, part of what transpired there had to do with umpires not really being consistent in the way they uphold rules. So she was called for a coaching violation, and you could see that he was actually trying to coach her. Right. But you can't always see that, and so it's not always called. And so when you're inconsistent like that, it can lead to moments like this. Not to say that Serena did not, you know, share some blame in, managing her situation.
Right.
But I just wanted to put that perspective out there. And so I pitched it, and they said, sure, I think we should write that, because we're actually wondering about that. Because there was also the sexism piece, and the racism piece that people were also talking about. And I just thought, from a purely tennis perspective, I can see where this just has to do with the rules and how they're upheld. And so they gave me that platform, and it was crazy. I just, like, the irony to me was that I was a journalist all that time, and it was one of those outlets that you always think about as a journalist. Like, man, it'd be nice. And it's like, I get out of journalism, and I get into the Washington Post. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, all I had to do was leave.
And have that opinion.
Yeah.
And of course, have that wealth of knowledge and what have you from your 20 years of playing and knowing the game. But that's the thing, I think, that we as writers often forget, that we can use these things. Oh, never look at things as if it's something off to the side. You can bring all of you to bear into your writing and find outlets for that. Which is like, you're the poster child for that just now. You're like, oh, these people, they don't get it. Do you watch this stuff? You don't get it. And so.
Yes, I channeled it into English.
Right. And of course, I have to admit, I was one of those people going, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you wrote that, and I'm like, well, I should just probably shut up.
Well, it's not that, I mean, everyone has opinions. It's just a matter of considering all perspectives.
But see, I didn't know that perspective, and so it was good that you put that out there. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is Shondaland.
Yes.
Now, if you're wondering, what in the world is Shondaland?
Oh, my goodness.
There are some people who don't know. There are some people who don't know. Grey's Anatomy, Private Practice, How to Get Away with Murder.
I'm pretty sure there's another big one.
And there is another one, too. The creator of those shows, her name is Shonda Rhimes. She's fantastic.
She's the best.
She's just absolutely
She's goals.
Fantastic.
Hashtag goals.
Yes, hashtag goals is absolutely right. She has she has an empire. She writes, produces, I think she probably throws a little directing in there. She does everything.
She does.
And last year or the year before, I can't remember, she started a website called Shondaland, which is the name of her company, right?
It is.
Right. And so I love it. I read Shondaland, I'm like, yes, I've subscribed to the blog, all this kind of stuff. Yes, so I'm like going through my email, Oh, that looks Nafari, what? I know this woman.
Right.
And I'm like, hey, why did you not send me an email and say, hey, I'm on Shondaland?
I don't like to brag. Journalists, I think, are usually very,
low-key?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very backgroundy.
It was fantastic. I read it. I'm like, whoa. I gushed on Twitter. I made friends with, what's her name, Dr. Marsha
Chatelain.
Right.
Yes. And so.
Tell us just a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, that is, it's hard to know where to start from the beginning, because there was a lot of things that led to that. But basically, I'm familiar with Dr. Chatelain because I listen to a lot of podcasts. And she co-hosted a podcast called Undisclosed, and it was about the Freddie Gray situation in Baltimore.
Right.
And what I really loved about it, it was a really complex body of work, the podcast, and her contribution to it. She's a history professor. Right. So every episode kind of started with a perspective about how things came to be in Pittsburgh, in Baltimore.
Right.
The housing projects, just the way back, just a deep dive, and then it just sort of layered on the, you know, how Freddie Gray even ended up in the place where he lived and why, and you know, it was such a great piece of journalism. I really enjoyed it, and I have been thinking about what history would show us about this time that we're living through right now with this current administration. And, you know, what we could actually learn from history. And the cool thing about Dr. Chatelain is that she really does a lot with using history as an applied science. I love that. I mean, I'm a nerd anyway, but, you know, I just loved the way she used it in that show. And I thought to myself, you know, it'd be cool to interview her and kind of have her do that with where we are right now in our history. And I wonder if she would do that. And not being in journalism anymore, it's kind of odd because you usually have an editor who pitches you, or you pitch to the editor, they're like, yes, go do it, or, you know, you usually, I guess I was a new freelancer at the time, so I was just having this idea and not sure where to go with it or how to pursue it, and I was like, I don't even know if she would talk to me. So I just emailed her and I said, would you know, be interested in this? And I told her I wanted to pitch it to several publications, and she did not hesitate. She was so generous with her time. It was 3 days after Christmas, and we had a long conversation, and she was just so, I mean, she's so smart. I mean, I did nothing except let her talk, because she's just so smart. And so I did that, and I was just like, wow, I can't believe I got her to talk to me. Now, how am I going to get this thing published? So I began just pitching it around, and it took, you know, I felt to myself, I was like, I had her, you know, invest her time in me. I have to get this placed somewhere. And I just kept pitching and pitching and pitching and pitching and didn't hear anything. I was like, well, I got to pitch again. We got to keep pitching. We got to get this published. And then someone from Shondaland reached out, I would say 2 months after I pitched it. And they said, hey, do you still have that? I said, yes, I do. Would you like to see it? So, yeah, that's basically what happened. They looked at it and they were like, this is really, I mean, it really is a good fit with their website, because they are trying to be really smart with their pieces and use diversity. And I thought that it would be really great to introduce Dr. Chatelain to that audience, and it was a pleasure to be allowed to do it. And I mean, she followed me on Twitter, and I was just like, oh my gosh, well, I'm done. I've done everything. Because it was a really, I mean, she is brilliant, and it was great to be able to introduce her to a different audience who might not be familiar with her, and, you know. So it was great. It was great, and it was one of, boy, that was the beginning of 2018. So, you know, that was probably my first freelance piece in a long while. I think, yeah, a long while. I'm not even going to count.
That's okay. But that you landed it at this really substantial place is just amazing.
It is.
So,
it's crazy.
So right after that, the next thing I'm seeing is like Washington Post. I'm like, oh, come on. Stop trying to take over the world here. Or at least take over the world and bring me with you.
Okay, let's go. What are we going to do next?
And of course, you know I'm going to do it just for a little bit. I'm going to ask you, so you're doing more than just writing these types of pieces. You're writing fiction, aren't you?
Dirty secret?
In your little back over in the corner?
Under my bed?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And this is another long story that I'm going to condense.
But you don't have to tell us all of your stuff, because I don't want people to steal your ideas, as they say.
Well, you understand how hard it is as a writer sometimes to share your ideas, because they sound bonkers maybe to other people when they say. But I have always made up stories. I remember I was thinking about, like, when I was probably my son's age, like 7, 8 years old, just writing. I think I had seen the movie Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, I remember that.
But I then wrote a story based on me being a little person running around my house trying to get my family's attention. Just
Right.
so I've always been writing fiction. And, you know, when you get to be, you know, you choose profession sometimes and you try to write on the side, you also, you know, have an eye on money, so you think about that. And so sometimes that stuff gets shoved off to the side. And, you know, 2018 was probably the first year that I thought about really being serious about my freelancing.
Okay.
But I wanted to find a way to put a number on my goals. So I, you know, picked a money figure. I said, well, I need to make this amount of money every quarter to be successful. I didn't meet my goal.
You did?
I did not.
Oh, okay.
I came close. But
Whoa.
what I found myself doing was pursuing like content marketing stories.
Yeah.
Just and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that is a good, solid way to make money, writing. But it was not something I was successful with, and it wasn't bringing me joy anyway.
I was just going to say that.
Right. So at the end of the year, I just looked at everything I had done, and I said, okay, why did I enjoy writing in the first place? And I was like, you like making things up. You like fiction. Right. So maybe you should start writing again, like that again. So I have started to dust off stories that I literally started when I was in high school and college.
That's okay.
Which is crazy, because I look back at, you know, the originals and I'm just like, oh child, you've grown. But it's still like, it's fun, and it's bringing joy back to my writing life, to get back to that place of fiction and creating your own world like Shonda Rhimes does.
Right.
And so it's frustrating sometimes, and I think what makes it frustrating for me is having an editing background. And the tendency is to write sentence, delete sentence, you know, or in editing other people's copy, you'll read it, and then you'll say, okay, well, this needs to be about 100 words shorter, so we got to cut everything out. So in fiction writing, you cannot do that. You cannot finish anything. And I realized just recently that that is why I had so much trouble finishing things, because I was editing myself in the process. Right. And I just have to learn, it's still a work in progress, to just let it out. Just write it and edit it later. Right. Because you know you'll want to. You will, and you should, but you shouldn't do it now. Just write, and don't filter yourself right out of the bat, because that's terrible.
But with that said, thank you, Nafari, for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you.
It's been great. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Writer's Den.